We begin in Gaza, where aid groups warn the level of desperation has reached unprecedented levels. The World Food Program says it has stopped food deliveries to the north. They say it's no longer safe after their convoys were faced with gunfire and violence. The entire region is on the brink of famine. Food and safe water are extremely scarce. Most of the population is sheltering in Rafah, where Israel is threatening to launch a military offensive. Minister of International Development Ahmed Hussen joins me now. Minister, welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So you were in Rafah today on the Egypt side. I'm wondering if you can give us a sense of what you saw at this border crossing.
I was both in Rafah and in El Arish, which is the main logistical hub for receiving international humanitarian assistance into Egypt towards Gaza. At the Rafah border crossing, I was able to see hundreds and hundreds of trucks stationed there, not being able to go in. Trucks full of food and medicine and other much needed essential supplies. The situation is very dire. I was able to meet humanitarian and health workers who came from Gaza into the Egyptian side of Rafah to update me on the situation on the ground, and they are very, very concerned about the situation on the ground. I was also able to get briefings and see for myself the sheer amount of backlogs and number of trucks too numerous to count that are waiting to get in. So the pace of access into Gaza, the volume of trucks is very low, and I was able to see that for myself. And of course, this is something that's very troubling to the humanitarian workers on the ground who are in Gaza, who know the extent of the need of the population, and they were able to brief me on the dire state of affairs on the ground.
So on that point, the World Food Program has said today it's no longer going to deliver aid into the northern part of Gaza because of the safety situation inside the Strip itself. What is the reason for the slow delay? Is it the security checks of getting in? Is it still a security holdup, or is it a lack of humanitarian capacity to deliver the aid once it gets in? What's your assessment after hearing from people firsthand?
So I think it's all of the above. The aid is there. I was able to see a lot of aid that has been received through Egypt from many countries, including Canada. The issue remains the lack of unimpeded, constant, and adequate access into Gaza, but also the security situation in Gaza itself. Humanitarian workers and others are very much concerned about the lack of safety and protection for the humanitarian workers who are delivering this much needed food, medicine, and other supplies. It's also the hurdles that organizations, the UN organizations and other international organizations have to go through to deliver this aid into Gaza. There aren't enough border crossings. The few that exist, Kerem Shalom and Rafah, and it's simply not enough, and it takes too long. There's the processes and the time that it takes. It just creates huge backlogs, and we're very, of course, much concerned with that. And I was able to hear from the humanitarian workers on the ground in Gaza who came over to Egypt on the Egyptian side of Rafah to brief me, the impact that is having. So we are continuing to advocate for unimpeded access for both humanitarian workers as well as aid to go into Gaza. And once it goes into Gaza, to have unimpeded access to all of the population in Gaza. For example, in the north, it is even more dire than in the south and the center of Gaza. So just hearing from the people on the ground who are doing this every day in a very, very volatile situation is something to be really concerned about.
Well, I wonder, Minister, what those organizations have said to you about Canada's decision to pause its funding to UNRWA, because you talk about unimpeded distribution inside Gaza itself. The aid groups we've spoken to in the wake of this decision have said UNRWA is essential to that. It is the spine and the backbone of the operations inside Gaza itself. What have you heard from the aid groups in the region about your decision to stop your funding to UNRWA directly?
Well, we didn't, as I said, it's a temporary pause pending the results of an investigation. We know and recognize the value of UNRWA, its history, its presence on the ground, and its the crucial services it provides to Palestinian civilians, both in Gaza and in the region. And we announced a temporary pause on any additional funding pending the investigation. And of course, we hope this investigation can result in a transparent, comprehensive process that gives confidence for us to work, to continue to be able to work with UNRWA. Having said that, I also met with the world representatives from the World Food Program and from the International Committee of the Red Cross and the Red Crescent family, i.e., members of the Egyptian Red Crescent, many other international NGOs who are doing the work, and they are calling for Canada to continue to advocate for unimpeded and consistent and constant access for humanitarian supplies as well as the workers. In addition to that, they're asking for more border crossings to be opened into Gaza, in addition to a seaport, so that again the aid can get in. More aid can get in, and more aid can get in and be distributed to more people in Gaza. The situation is very dire, and of course, Canada is doing everything that we can. We were the first Western country to provide humanitarian aid to the civilians in Gaza. We then increased that by an additional $40 million on top of the $60 million that we initially provided, and we'll continue to be there for the people of Gaza. But that aid, it's not enough for the aid to get to the region. It has to get into Gaza. And we're calling for the authorities to make sure that there is unimpeded access, both for the aid and also for the humanitarian.
Well, Minister, while you're calling for that, at the United Nations today, the United States has vetoed a resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire. 13 members of the UN Security Council voted in favor. The UK abstained, and the US vetoed it, saying that calling for an immediate ceasefire undermines the negotiations the U.S. is involved in to try to secure the release of the hostages that have been held by Hamas since October 7th. How do you reconcile that? How does the international community reconcile that, that the U.S.'s efforts to release the hostages are trumping a Security Council call for an immediate ceasefire on the humanitarian grounds, with the IDF reportedly preparing to move into Rafah if necessary?
Well, our position on Rafah is clear. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has said publicly that Canada opposes any military action or an incursion into Rafah, because that will result in unimaginable humanitarian casualties. And we are obviously urging the Israeli authorities not to militarily intervene in Rafah. And my conversations with people on the ground in Gaza providing the humanitarian work has obviously confirmed that position. They are saying that that campaign will be disastrous, and so we are emphasizing the protection of civilians in Rafah, and for Israel to take utmost care not to engage in that military incursion.
But Minister, sorry to interrupt, but how do we get the ceasefire that you say you need, though?
If I was just about to answer
okay, sorry,
that.
go right ahead.
Look, I mean, again, our position on the ceasefire is clear. We believe that we need a ceasefire. The humanitarian workers have confirmed that for me. A ceasefire will result in more aid getting in and more aid being able to be distributed freely to people who are in desperate need. And one of the things that I've heard from the World Food Program in particular, the head of the World Food Program in Gaza, is the really dire need for food in northern Gaza. I mean, the need is great everywhere in Gaza, but in northern Gaza, it's even more dire, and it is, people are in really, really desperate shape, and so the fact of the matter is, a ceasefire will go a long way to help in the distribution.
So, but how do you get there, though, Minister? If Hamas won't release the hostages and Israel won't stop until the hostages are freed, and the U.S. vetoes international attempts to bring pressure through resolutions of the UN Security Council, how do you get there with these intractable positions so firmly in place?
Well, we believe that the hostages should be released. More aid should go in. Humanitarian workers should be assured of their safety, even in the conflict, even before a ceasefire. Humanitarian workers should be given safety guarantees, and we're very much concerned about the high number of deaths and injuries of people trying to deliver food and medicine and other supplies to the people of Gaza. That goes against international humanitarian law, and that has to stop. People are in desperate need of food, medicine, and water, other essential supplies, and the aid. There's a very high volume of aid now in the region, particularly in Egypt. I've seen it for myself. Mm-hmm. Literally, in just one spot alone, I was able to see, 700 trucks ready to go in. But unless that access, the volume increases, then we're dealing with a really serious situation. And what I've heard from the World Food Program representatives and others is just how close we are to a very catastrophic situation if the access is not improved in the next few days.
Minister Ahmed Hussen, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.